I'm not interested in delivering a message as much as inviting people to look for themselves. Say, okay, look here. You know, this is, and pointing the way of a place to look to see, perhaps, where the truth lies. And
no certainty.
No certainty. Absolutely not. There's no certainty in the phenomenal world at all. The only certainty is change.
Yeah.
You know, so.
But could you say that's just love, what you're bringing here to Amsterdam?
If you're being kind, you can say, you can call it love. You can call it openness, acceptance, peace, truth. I mean, there's a million words for it.
But doesn't it happen that a lot of women in the audience, they think that this human being is the one and get excited and maybe fall in love with you or write you tons of love letters? Or
does that happen?
Yeah.
That has happened over the years, of course.
So the mind tries to grasp it and says, he's the one, or...
I mean, there's all kinds of explanations and stories about people's relationships, men and women, with the guru. And it takes many forms. Sexuality is simply one form, but we as human beings have a sexual component to our nature. So it's only natural that be part of life, part of whether it's your spiritual life or your daily life.
But isn't the search always the search for love, for oneness, wholeness, love, whatever you want to call it?
Certainly we could call it that.
So you could say you bring love to Amsterdam.
I don't think Amsterdam was lacking in love prior to my getting here, actually.
Everything is love. Yeah.
But you sometimes see that people are really damaged in their childhood or traumas.
Sure.
I've noticed that when you start being busy with non-duality, all these things will come up. You've been holding them underwater, all these balls, all over the years, and then suddenly there's this space that everything is okay, and they pop up. Do you see that often with people?
To some degree, yes, but it's not, since that is not really the focus of my teaching. That is simply seen as another arising, phenomenal arising, and isn't given any more weight than anything else. That the real thrust is not in that arena. And so when those things arise, I suggest that people speak to a qualified therapist, of which I am not. And so I mean, I can't help them with those sorts of things because I'm simply not qualified to do it. My role is in pointing them in an entirely different direction.
And it's sometimes confusing for people, maybe, because you're telling it's already here, it's not that you are doing, it's simply happening. And then going to a therapist is something you do.
Yes. Well, that's actually not my message. What I'm saying is that you do it. You do it. You don't author it. And so I'm making a much more subtle distinction than you'll normally find in the broad non-dual talks where you're not the doer. I'm saying that you do things.
Yes.
You do things, all kinds of things, and you will be held responsible by the society for what you do.
Yes.
Perhaps, not necessarily, but very often. The real question is not so much about the doing, it's about the source of the doing. Where is this doing coming from? Who is authoring this doing? Clearly there is a me doing it. And I'm very comfortable using personal pronouns, I and me. Because there is a Wayne here that does things, that's talking now, that that does all kinds of things. It has relationships and has experiences of all kinds that are unique to Wayne. What is really at issue in my non-dual teaching is what is the author of what happens.
Where is it from?
What is the source of that which I do? Is it local? Is Wayne the source? Or is Wayne the instrument through which the entire universe is functioning?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really the question that the teaching is raising.
Yeah. But if you look at the microcosmos,
Yes.
those little ants,
Yes.
who all go about and do their thing,
Yes.
it's obvious that they're an instrument which is, we call that nature, we call
Yes.
that instinct.
Yes.
Why would it be different with a human being? Isn't nature the perfect example of that?
It is a perfect example of that. But, and here's where it all gets very interesting and quite complicated, at the age of 2.5 in human beings,
We get an intellect.
you get, no, it's not you get an intellect, you get the false sense of authorship, which claims the intellect. The intellect is a feature of the body,
Okay.
and it will continue even after, quote, enlightenment, even after the false sense of authorship dies. The intellect continues. It's not the source of the separation. It
Nothing
is
wrong with the intellect.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, without it, you have difficulty functioning as a human being. Okay, so the intellect is functional. So in an attempt to home in on what it is that is bringing about human suffering,
Yeah.
because that's what we're really talking about. What is it makes us suffer? Life is pleasure and pain. There's no getting around that. If you're alive, you're breathing, you will have pleasure and you will have pain. You'll have joy, you'll have sorrow. You'll be up, you'll be down. Exactly. That's going to happen. But what is it that converts this into suffering? That's so if you can like home in and just kind of laser in on what is it that is actually doing the suffering. It's not the me. It's not, identity, really. It's this quality that claims the me, that claims the identity, that claims the mind, that claims the intellect, and says, I am that. Mm-hmm. And I call that the false sense of authorship, or the FSA for short. So when you begin to see that it is this FSA, this false sense of authorship, that is where the suffering is coming from. This is a huge first step in having that whole mechanism disappear. Because first, you've got to see that it's even there. Because it is so insidious in its claim on your identity that for most people, they're just one thing. You see, it's not seen that they're two. It's thought to be one thing, and that's why so many teachings say you must be rid of the me.
The person. Yeah.
Because they're just saying, okay, this is where the suffering is coming from. So you got to get rid of it. But you can't. You can't unless you're going to be sitting drooling someplace without any sense of identity, any knowing who you are, where your house is, Yeah. So what we're really talking about is somehow seeing that there are two components in the me. There is the functional me, the identity of who I am, and I do things, and I have a history, and there is this additional, this false claim of authorship, which claims that which the functional me is doing. It says, I'm doing that. I'm in control.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not. The functional me, which is an expression of the universe, through genetics, through the conditioning of the organism by its environment, all of which is happening through countless influences. Mm-hmm.